Okay. Partha, you can also put the Slido code in the chat box if you can, please. Yeah. So welcome to the CG Level Connect series number 20. Today is Sunday, February 19th, um, 8 p.m. India Standard Time. So some brief guidelines for those who are new to the program. We'd like you to stay muted during the program so that there is no external audio interference. We would like you to turn off the video initially. Somewhere in the second half of the program, I will request you to open the video so we can take a screenshot with all the participants. Um, this entire session is recorded and we are recording it for the benefit of those who are not able to join today. And we will make this video available in a few days in our public YouTube channel, CG Connect. If you have any questions during the program, we're going to introduce a open source software called Slido, which I'll talk about in a second. You can use Slido to ask your questions anytime during the program. We also use Slido to do some online real-time polls about the session. So please participate in the poll on Slido. In the couple of slides later, I'll tell you how to use Slido. And when you start posting your questions, you can put your name. When during the Q&A session in the second half, when your name is called, you could please you can unmute and please ask your question to the guest. So today's guest speaker is Mr. Jeyandran Venugopal. Jay is from 1998 CEG Mechanical Engineering. He's a Chief Product and Chief Technology Officer at Flipkart. I'm sure all of you are customers of Flipkart. So we can hear about Jay's experience with Flipkart and anything that we find interesting in his work there. I'll be the host, and we're also introducing a new co-host, Jaytesh Kalpakam. Jaytesh is from 2016 Media Sciences. He's going to come up with slightly different format for the program, so we're going to try out a new format to see how that works for us in making this program more useful and relevant to all the participants. And of course, Partha is my tech support who does all our website as well as recording activities. So to join Slido's program, you can go to any browser, any device, and you can type slido.com. When you type that, you will get a screen where you have to input this code 2068155. So when you input this 2068155 in that box, when you open slido.com, you'll be taken to the Slido session that looks like this. So you'll have a Q&A tab and a polls tab. The real-time polls I'm posting will come here. Please participate in them. In the Q&A, you can type your question anytime during the program, and periodically Partha will be posting in the Google chat box the Slido code in case you want to rejoin or reconnect or you came join late. So the Slido poll number will be coming up on the Google chat box periodically. Okay, so I'm going to now close the presentation and stop sharing and hand it over to Jayendran. So Jay, welcome to the show. So Jaytesh and I are both going to do the program together for the first time. So what we want to do is initially I want you to talk about your journey from the time you left CEG to where you are now. You could also go back in time if you will, about even before CEG. Some of my guests say that they have more interesting thing to say before they'll join CEG. So you're welcome to do it. What we're going to do is Jaytesh and I will during the course of your story might ask questions to clarify or add things to that. So it'll be a lot of a more conversational way of talking versus the previous format I had where I let the guest speak for some time in a monologue. So we're going to try this little different conversational theme this time, and so let's see how it goes. So over to you, and I want you to try and see if we can finish this particular section of the program in about 20 minutes, please.
Sure. So I'll start with my schooling days. So I grew up in Madurai. So I'm sure all of you have been to Madurai, Temple Town. So my father used to work for Life Insurance Corporation of India. So typical kind of like middle class family raised with those kind of values, backgrounds, and all that, right? So studied there, and then throughout my schooling, especially 11th and 12th, I would say much more interested in like sports, and I used to represent my school in quizzing, debates, and like I spent more days outside the school than inside the school. But somehow nevertheless I ended up making my way into CEG. I would say just God's will, I suppose, and some luck maybe. And I mean, of course, like during your school days, you really don't have a good understanding of what is really your liking and what you want to do and all that, right? So, I mean, people around you tell you what you need to do, and you say, okay, so let's go do that, right? So, engineering was it. right? So typical kind of the channel that all of us kind of get pointed at, right? So I did join mechanical engineering, finish my mechanical engineering. I was very interested in math, so I really enjoyed mechanical engineering because it has a lot of math, right? And in most of its core subjects, there is a lot of math. So I did enjoy the studies there, and then uh, my thesis work in mechanical engineering was in fluid dynamics, in computational fluid dynamics. So I decided to continue that and do a master's in computational fluid dynamics. So got into University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign into a mechanical engineering program, master's in mechanical engineering, specializing in CFD. I hope nobody will ask me any questions about CFD because I wouldn't remember a single thing about it after 25 years. But yeah, I did. I while doing my masters, because that was the first time I had to really use computational kind of like constructs in a heavy way for solving simulations at scale. I had to start taking some computer science courses at UIUC, right? So basically numerical methods, and then to algorithms and massively parallel computing and all that. So I did it out of necessity because that was required for the physical simulations I was hoping to run for my thesis work. And but then I realized that I was very interested in the algorithmic constructs itself, and computer science really caught my fancy. So like 1.5 years into it, I told my prof, look, I'm not going to continue for a PhD. Let me exit with a master's, and then I want to actually switch my field and go into computer science. To date, I think that that was basically one of the best decisions I made in my life, and what shaped my career. Not worrying about like 6 years of sunk cost, and then when something really was, I was very clear that something really caught my attention, and it was something that I was very passionate about. I said, let me go do that, right? So, and much to the angst and anger of my professor, I did not continue in the PhD program. I finished my master's in mechanical engineering, applied for a second master's in computer science in the same university, Urbana-Champaign, got in and finished my master's. And as I was doing it, I interned with Amazon. So this Amazon at those days, like it was a like 4 or 5 year old company. Uh, like dot coms were still actually not yet a thing, right? Like people were still not sure whether this was ever going to go anywhere or not, and there was a lot of people who said Amazon will die very soon and all that. So I interned at Amazon in 2000, in the summer of 2000, when pretty much the dot com bust was happening. And and I got a full time offer during my internship. So I decided to go back to Amazon, join full time. So I did have a lot of other options from more traditional companies at that time, the likes of Dell or HP, EMC is another one. I had an offer with a bunch of them, right? So, and some of them, in fact, had higher kind of compensation packages and all that. But I really liked Amazon's culture at that time, right? So I really liked the team I worked with, the mentors that I was interacting with, and I said, okay, I need to really index on learning, and this seems like a really, really charged up environment for learning. So that again, in hindsight, I would say it turned out to be a fantastic decision, right? Today, I can claim here, I mean, sit here and claim and that I had all the foresight to do that, but honestly, it was nothing like that, right? Like, I mean, it was just, I would say, just a series of circumstances where by happenstance I happened to have made the choices that helped shape my career. So I worked with Amazon for 4 years, was able to grow reasonably fast within the company because the company was like very small at the time and was very meritocratic, and people who showed a lot of initiative, ownership, they did not hesitate giving accelerated ownership and responsibilities. Within 4 years of me joining there as an intern and then as a full-time employee, within 4 years I was leading large chunks of their core e-commerce platforms and their order processing systems, especially in payments and like bunch of areas like that, right? So and I got, so I was like kind of fairly settled in, doing reasonably okay, and I knew that I had a good growth path there, and won some company awards and all early, which kind of like gave me the confidence that I was in the right direction. But then in 2004, there was this fantastic opportunity that I was asked to be part of the India Development Center. So they were, for the first time in Amazon was thinking about setting up a remote development center and tapping into talent globally. And there was a team of about 4 people who were in the managerial cadre who were picked to be the founding members of the India Dev Center, which was the first large remote dev center that was being set up. And when I was approached and asked, hey, do you want to, like, you have been selected as a culture ambassador to go build this center as a part of the founding team, I jumped at that opportunity. 2 reasons. One was I really wanted to come back to India for personal reasons. So I was already starting to think about it. And this opportunity seemed interesting because 4 years it had gotten a little bit to a point where I was like very comfortable, was getting a bit boring. And I said, okay, this is something very new, right? Like, how do you go and open a new development center, do something you've never done before, and maybe fail, maybe succeed, but I was sure there'll be a lot of learnings. So I came and I was part of a team of 4 people, and we brought along with us a handful of engineers as seed engineers, and we built the entire Amazon center from there, right? So it was a fantastic experience. Over 4 years, then I led Amazon's web services team here in India at that time, and we set up a bunch of other divisions. And then I was part of the site leadership team, and I was leading one of the engineering divisions. So that was 4 years, and by then it had been like by 2008 I had been with Amazon for 8 years, and even this novelty of like doing this dev center, growing it, had kind of started waning because that model worked pretty well. And seeing the success of the Bangalore center, like Amazon now opened centers in Chennai, in Hyderabad, and it had already scaled to thousands of people across these centers. And that time Yahoo kind of came and said, look, you have experience building centers from scratch, building teams from scratch, and scaling them in core tech areas, right? So they wanted to set up a center of excellence for search engineering in India. So they said, okay, with your experience, let's do this. And search was and is a very interesting engineering problem, right? Engineering, product, data science, information retrieval theory. There is a lot of very challenging aspects from scale to complexity in search engineering. So that was like very interesting for me to like. I decided I'm not going to pass up on this. So joined there again, did that same journey of building the team almost from scratch, and over a couple of years period, like by the time Yahoo decided to sell off search to Bing, uh, through a restructuring deal that was done. Like our India team by then had grown and was owning substantial parts of the overall search backend for global Yahoo properties. So after that, the Bing deal happened, and then I did too many other things at Yahoo. I won't name all of them. It'll take like way longer than the 20 minutes you have allotted me, Vish. So did too many things like ad tech, private cloud, geo services, so on and so forth. So I won't name everything. So did that until 2014, and kind of the I can call it a midlife crisis, whatever it is, right? So kind of the startup bug bit me. So I was kind of feeling that while e-commerce had already started gaining some foothold in India, I thought that like sectors like education and healthcare, which had a very equal social impact measure as commercial potential, were not being kind of like ventured into, or technology was not being leveraged for those areas. And technology is a great leveler, right? I really believe through my experience, what I've seen with my own eye, that technology is one of the greatest levelers humanity has ever invented, right? So basically it can bridge gaps of like access, like I mean, you don't need to be physically in the same place to get access to something. You can do it remotely. Time, for example, you can bridge across time, right? So you don't need to be at a particular place at a particular time. Like you can schedule it, you can slot it, you can do a lot of stuff, right? Remote stuff. So I said, okay, in India there is a lot of gap in healthcare delivery in metros, tier one cities versus tier two. Why don't we use technology to try to disrupt that and bring quality healthcare everywhere? So I set up this company called eClinic. Uh, Basically, it's a telemedicine company, 24/7 telemedicine services. It was a bit ahead of its time, but we did reasonably. I mean, we raised some funding, small amount of institutional funding. We were able to build both a B2B and a B2C business. And over 2 to 3 years, we built and scaled the business. It was a fairly lean operation. I mean, my team never went beyond like 15, 20 people. And I raised only like $500,000, right? So we were able to run that company for almost 2.5 years with just $500,000, fairly lean operation, right? And we had like steady revenues coming in from both B2B and B2C, but it was very clear that like video adoption for remote calling and doing teleconsultations with doctors remotely, etc., needed a lot of like investments into the concept itself. It was not about marketing a company; it was about marketing a concept itself for the first time to the country, right? So today there are lots of telemedicine services, but when we launched, to my knowledge, we were the very first commercial telemedicine service to launch in the country. ISRO had launched something, and there was a few pilots like that from government bodies, but we were the first startup to do a telemedicine service. So that became a bit difficult. So I really wanted to kind of like work with some other company that was able to take what we had built and scale it up and wanted to invest in it. So I was able to find a buyer for the startup. So at that time, the largest e-pharma company in the country was trying to venture into telemedicine as well. Medlife was the name of the company. Now they have merged with another company called Pharmacy. I'm sure a lot of you know Pharmacy, right? So they are the leaders in e-pharma now. So I sold my company to that Midlife, and then came back to the corporate world and joined back into e-commerce. Initially, was doing a product and tech leadership role at Myntra, which is a fashion and lifestyle focused subsidiary within the Flipkart group. And then within a year and a half of me doing that, I moved into a role at Flipkart, and which is now this role that I'm playing, which kind of very soon after shaped into this role that I'm playing, which is the CPTO role. CPTO role is a bit of a new concept. There are typically companies which have a CPO, CTO, and a CIO as well. CIO kind of like who leads corporate IT and information security and all of that. So this role is kind of a mix of all of these. So I lead all of these functions. I lead product, design, user research, engineering that spans everywhere, everything from data centers, uh, like designing, building data centers, all the way up to the consumer applications that we roll out, the features that we roll out on that, the seller facing applications and systems, and brand facing stuff, and everything in between, right? So supply chain systems, automation, robotics that we do in supply chain, everything is part of that, the engineering, and data science, and also the infosec and corporate IT kind of function. So it's kind of a CPO plus CTO plus CIO kind of a role. There are companies that are moving into this model now, that these days it's variously called as like CDO, for example, is another terminology people have. Chief Digital Officer is kind of another synonym for this kind of a role. We call it CPTO, but essentially it's a similar kind of construct. So that's where I am. So I guess almost out of that 20 minutes time that you gave me, Vish. So I will turn it over back to you and Jaitesh, and happy to answer any questions any of you have.
Thank you, Jay. That's very interesting. You have many things you covered. You covered this stuff from going from mechanical to computer science, India to US, corporate to startup, back to corporate. So a lot of interesting turns you have taken in your career. So I'm sure we will have more questions for that. So Jaitesh, do you want to start with questions or?
Yeah, first of all, before I get into the questions, I have to say I'm a huge fan mainly because I recently discovered that you have the patent behind completely automated Turing technology that can differentiate between computers and humans, otherwise known as CAPTCHA.
A
Wait,
variant of CAPTCHA. Yeah, it's not. It's a, yeah. It's IP disclosure we filed way back in 2002 or
were
something. Yeah.
you are you the father of CAPTCHA?
No, 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 no.
Okay,
So it was a variant of CAPTCHA, which was basically image-based CAPTCHA. We filed the IP disclosure for it.
okay,
So I have other patents in the payments domain, but I don't know whether we filed a patent for it. It was IP disclosure that we did
okay.
during my Yahoo days. I remember. Yeah, it was some in some sense you can say that a lot of the image-based captchas that you see, where you're asked
Mhm.
to find semantic information from images
Yeah, yeah.
to authenticate yourself as a human. The foundation of that is basically the IP disclosure that we filed. I don't know when,
So,
2008 or
why
7.
don't we make this a big deal that someone on stage is done? Why can't we make it a big deal? This sounds like a big deal.
It is a big deal. That's why I was like,
Oh,
wow,
no, I
okay.
know, I know, not to compare anyone. Some of the IIT friends make a big deal of literally nothing, and we had done a really big deal here, and we're not talking about it. I mean, this is really amazing. It's really amazing.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
not just capture. Listen to your story right now. I think you were in the actual .com bustle. You were in the valley when it happened. You were in Amazon. You were one of the
yeah,
interns when the tech mogul of the world was literally just taking baby steps. So I think you are a powerhouse of information and just of really good experience. You've seen this entire era from its birthplace, and you've also led the entire era coming all the way across the subcontinent and seen the entire digital growth in a place like India,
mm,
which is super conservative. So I mean, there's so much of knowledge that you can just share with us of how all these experiences was. But yeah, I just want to say I'm a fan by just listening to all what you said. So thank you for
Thank
listening
you.
for us as
Hey,
well.
thanks, Rajitesh. Very kind words. In fact, more than the image, the capture related patent, like or the IP disclosure,
Yeah, you made
the
something
one,
for videos and products. That was pretty
uh,
cool. So I
yeah,
saw that.
the one thing, the out of the patents that I have, the one thing that I would say is the one that I am actually most happy about or proud of in some sense is basically we filed a patent for automated payment instructions. So basically, contract-based automated machine-to-machine payment transactions. This was way back in 2002, 2003, much before blockchain
Wow, wow,
and smart contracts and all that.
Mhm.
wow.
So
Interesting.
so
I
of
think
course, I mean the thing is we never did anything with it, right? So we filed the patent. We actually filed some internal concept papers. We even released a service actually based on what is called consistent hashing for doing microservices over the web. But I mean, clearly the commercial potential was not there way back in 2004-5, so it never scaled up.
so
So
when
I was
is
very happy to see what happened later when blockchain tech came up, and I felt vindicated that there is something in the patent that we filed. After all, the world has come around once more, and then now they are really into that idea. So
so when you say we, are you talking about Yahoo or Amazon
this was
or
an Amazon. Me and a couple of my teammates, we filed a patent for automated payment transactions based on instructions as a machine-to-machine payments. Uh, so that this was in 2002 or three. Like
uh,
it's way before cryptocurrencies, blockchain, none of that came about.
and Amazon never used it?
So we internally pitched it, and then we created a pitch for a product called. We eventually launched something called flexible payment services, which was a micro payment service for doing kind of send or sub-send transactions for gaming payments and all of that stuff.
Mm.
So it was like a so that was a use case that was launched at that time, but it was very clear even to us that there was not enough commercial potential in it for the likes
Okay.
of Amazon, right? See, in many big companies what happens is like some things that are very interesting could have a lot of potential, like in a company which is already like a several tens of billions, hundreds of billions large,
Mm.
right? Like
Mm.
any idea that is like not doesn't have enough visibility in near term visibility have like $1 billion potential is classified as too small for us to worry about, like, and I don't blame them as well. Like this happens in all big companies, right? Like that like if there are like $2 trillion companies now, right? Like we talk so much about how a unicorn is such a big thing, right? Like if you propose an idea which in 4 years 5 years will become a unicorn in the context of a company like Microsoft, they would say it's like too small for us to even think about. Like we are a $2.5 trillion company, right? Like so I guess yeah. I'm also a firm believer that the whole corporate model, the workforce model, and innovation model will drastically change in the years to come. I do think that with advent of a lot more freelancing, gig economy kind of workforce, decentralization of knowledge, and wide accessibility of knowledge, there will be a lot of disruption to how corporates function. In the blockchain world, also, you already are starting to see these things called DAOs, right? Decentralized autonomous organizations. So where there is no hierarchy, right? So if you are vested into a project, you buy tokens in you buy basically DAO tokens, and then you have certain voting rights and decisions of how the evolution of that product happens, and then the community just keeps pushing the product along, right? So I don't know whether this particular model will succeed or something else, but I do believe that like the way corporates function has largely stayed the same for I don't know hundreds of years now, right? So I'm a firm believer that it is a bit of an outdated model, and in the years to come, technology will reshape and revamp how even corporates function. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's also something that I wanted to ask you because I run a startup as well. And to be honest, the starting our company culture was all like, we're not going to be corporate. We're going to be different. We're going to be open scale. We'll be decentralized. But I'll be completely honest with you. After 6 years of running, I'm like, Macha, let's just become corporate, please. We're not able to take this because there is so much of fluidity. There's not anyone taking up ownership. There's so many fires that get, in all practical terms, I've dealt with the entire remote working, gig economy. I've done the entire thing. And I'm kind of reverting back to, what I think a brick and mortar is all that makes sense. Especially like you spoke about the DAO and how communities run things. But you were a chief product officer. You are one also. So you understand perfectly well how ownership is very vital in any part of the business. You need one name who will answer that question when it's thrown out, when the fire is erupting. So how does that how does that even compare in something like a DAO? Does it make sense or not? What do you feel?
See, interesting question. See, I don't. These models are still evolving, right? I'm just saying that the model will change. In what direction it will change? Will there be a hybrid model in the future, etc., for us to see? But one thing I'm confident of is that the change is coming, right? And if you look at, for example, how open source communities are functioned, right? Like if you look at the likes of like Hadoop and all that, right? Like which really literally took over the world in terms of how big data systems work, right? You don't have like, so there is a project management core committee, a PMC, which is it's entirely meritocratic, right? So basically people who do the most number of contributions eventually become the PMC members by means of the community agreeing together, right? Of course there is a lot of politics that happens as well. Companies which sense potential in it and commercial potential in it try to corner the market and then try to advocate and lobby and politic. So like anything that is good will have people coming in trying to kind of detract the goodness out of it, right? So all that happens, but at the end of the day, in spite of all of that, I think open source movements have actually really been a powerful driver of change, right? So today, if you look at how like Apache open source initiatives function, things like Kubernetes. For those of you in computer science, you will realize what I'm talking about. Kubernetes, Istio, and others, right? So the entire foundational principles of how we deploy our software to production clusters, how we size them, how we scale them. Most scaled companies have moved on to working on top of open source projects, right? So and they're by definition decentralized, right? So they don't have like hierarchical decision making, right? So there are members who become influential over time by means of their consistent contribution and voice in the community. And that naturally happens. That'll be there. I mean, it's not going to be like a completely egalitarian society, right? There'll be some element of merit driven element to it. Politics will always be there. I mean, I always say that whenever there are two humans, there is politics, right? So so that you can't decouple that at all. But I think that those kind of models will eventually start influencing corporate culture internally. Also within Flipkart, I am actually starting to aggressively promote something I'm calling as internal open source, to break firewalls between teams and then say that, hey, you shall have well-defined API contracts, regressions, and if there are teams that want to come in and do work in your stack, as long as they agree to certain guardrails in terms of reviews and passing all regressions and giving some amount of their time for what we call as KTLO support, keep the lights on support, they should be allowed to do so, right? So nobody shall kind of wrap their arms around something and say I and only I can change the code here and all that, right? So it is hard. I mean, honestly, in a large company, I mean, my team has like 5,000 people, right, across all of these functions. Like trying to move some fundamental cultural principles in very well ingrained in people's mind is a hard journey. But I am a firm believer that like you have to keep trying to disrupt yourself. You need to keep doing something to see if you can be ahead of the disruption, right? Otherwise, like somebody else will come and disrupt it, and then you'll be left wanting. You'll be wondering
Yeah.
what is happening to me and running to catch up.
Yeah, I think I had to say, Jay, that a lot of the words and acronyms, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have absolutely no idea. I feel very stupid listening to the
No, no, my
conversation.
apologies. My
No, no, no.
apologies.
No,
I have to.
no, I'm just saying that I think the world has moved on since we graduated from CEG 100 years ago.
Uh-huh.
That and you guys not only having acronyms, you're abbreviating acronyms now. But it is cool. It is really cool. The kind of stuff you're doing is really cool, and I wish that we can get more of these things proliferated amongst our network of people to learn and do things. But definitely your IP and your patent, I want to know more about it. I think we need to talk about it more, and people can come on. I'm sure other CGNs are doing patent and no one is talking about it. And one of the purposes of this kind of program is people to sort of know that we do a lot of cool things, we just don't know about them, and I
Yeah.
want to use this opportunity to kind of propagate that.
Yeah.
So
And in a lot of companies, actually, they don't pay too much attention to patents, even though Flipkart has done a lot of groundbreaking things in terms of innovation at the software level and various other things, right? So new features that we have launched and all that. There was never any focus on patenting, right? So about 2 years back, like I thought that was a big missing element in our company's strategy, because if you see a lot of these big tech behemoths, right? Like when Yahoo almost kind of dissolved itself and sold it off in parts, the patent portfolio of Yahoo itself was valued at a few $1 billion.
mm, mm.
So 2 years back internally, I kind of kickstarted a program within Flipkart and we created a IP council. We got a bunch of volunteers who were interested to contribute and evaluate new ideas and create a IP pipeline. Just in a matter of year and a half now, we have like 200 plus filed patent applications. Some of them are very close to the issuing stage, and some of them filed globally, some of them only in India, and so on and so forth. Right. So I think every company, everybody should think about how to protect their IP, how to use patenting as a mechanism to bring out valuable ideas from everybody in the company. It's not like this patent program, we opened it up not just for product, tech, design, data science people, but it's a company-wide program. We created incentive structures,
Yeah.
and it has taken off really, really well. That's something
Super.
that yeah.
Super. So while we're continuing the discussion, I want to tell all audience also you can start asking your questions in Slido, so we can ask Jay those. The other question, next question I had, Jay, is that we can't have a conversation lately about technology unless we talk about Chat
Chat
GPT.
GPT, I'm sure.
So
Yeah.
Chat GPT has become such a commonly used word now. It's like, I think if I go on Google, what is the most commonly used word? It's Chat GPT now. And I was reading an article in New York Times recently about how Chat GPT can go very crazy very soon. One of the New York Times reporters having a very long 20-minute conversation, and finally, apparently, I don't know if it is true, Chat GPT said, "I love you," to the reporter. It's a news article, and the reporter actually had put the entire transcript of the entire conversation, and it is weird. At the end, it got really weird that ChatGPT is talking like a teenager. So ChatGPT is a thing now, and I presume being a CPTO on Flipkart, you guys need to worry about it or think about it at least. Any
Yeah.
any any kind of words on what is it and what would be a future for that, and is it real or is it just some kind of hype?
Sure. So we have also been working on what I call as LLMs, large language models. Yet another acronym. I'm sorry about that, but ChatGPT is just simply the biggest LLM model that's out there, right? In the public domain. Of course, ChatGPT 3.5 and the model that others have come out with, right? Google has its own model called Lambda, and they have another model called Palm and all that. So they are some of them are claimed to be even bigger in terms of either token space, the parameter space, or the token space. So it is for sure a fairly groundbreaking technology. I believe that a lot of fields will change quite substantially, but I think people are actually overestimating its potential in the short term. I always believe that, right? I've seen this in lots of situations, lots of different technologies in the past, right? So this is what the Gartner hype cycle also says, right? So when a new technology comes, immediately there is so much hype that people expect the world out of it, right? Like that, it's almost as if like in 6 months, we will all be having flying cars and we will have invisible garments and whatnot, right? So that level of hype will be there, right? And then when it dies down, it doesn't come to what is real, but it goes even below. Like suddenly everybody will give up hope completely on that field, right? So and then eventually the Gartner hype cycle says that like it'll kind of like settle down at something which is more realistic and which is in line with the potential of the technology. Uh, my belief is this technology will not be very dissimilar, but I do think that it is a very, very promising and a very high potential technology. It has very simple premise in terms of how the models are actually constructed. It's a question of scale of the data that is thrown at the problem. And what we have learned in the last 15 years or so in the fields of like deep neural networks, reinforcement learning models, and others are being applied in a very simple but innovative way to this problem. So at the very core of it, the model is trained on something which is as simple as saying, given a string of tokens, can you predict the next best token that a human would use if they were to actually be the one completing that sentence completion task, right? Or the next word completion task. That's all that model is basically at its core trained to do. I'm simplifying it vastly, but that's the essence of it, right? And from there, you get behavior that almost starts to mimic human consciousness in some way, right? So I wouldn't go as far to say that this is the AI is getting to a point where it is actually having consciousness or it is having what we call as general intelligence. I think achieving artificial general intelligence AGI is still a long way away. When I say long way, I mean my own belief is it's probably like anywhere between 10 to 15 years or 20 years away. achieving true artificial general intelligence. Like I don't know how many of you follow things like the Singularity Institute and all that, right? So they predict what is called as a technological singularity, which is the invention of the artificial general intelligence. And beyond that, the reason it's called a singularity is that in physics you cannot predict what is behind a singularity or what happens after a singularity event happens, right? So similarly, there is no ability for us humans to predict what will happen once the singularity is reached. So
Yeah.
that's the only thing that is for sure is that the world will change like nothing, nobody can ever predict, right? So that's
Yeah.
what it is. So I do think that this technology paves the way for us and gets us very close to that on that journey of AGI. In the near term, I expect a lot of like jobs which rely on kind of rote protocols being followed will get offloaded to the AI.
Right.
Even developers actually have to reinvent themselves.
Right.
Lot of coding tasks that are now requiring a developer will get fully automated. So even today, even in our team, this is happening, right? People are actually going to ChatGPT to ask for. They may not write. It may not write the full code,
Mm.
but they'll give a kernel of the code and then say, okay, build the scaffolding around it,
Mm.
write the test wrappers for the whole thing, and so on and so forth, right? And host it in a server endpoint, and so on and so forth. So all the grunt work that you need to do, they're able to already easily offload to the
Yeah.
AI to do, right?
Yeah.
So I think if a job like a developer's job can be automated for a like 70% of what they do today, and that's not very far off. I think in 2-3 years we will see that a good chunk of developers' day-to-day life will look very different.
Yeah.
Uh,
The
yeah,
article I was reading said that ChatGPT and AI is the Netscape moment for browsers in the 90s, or the iPhone moment for mobile phones in the 2000s. I'm not sure. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know, but it certainly is attracting a lot of attention. I also read a statistic that a million users hit ChatGPT in 24 hours.
yeah,
What it took other technologies to reach more. So clearly, it's getting there. So,
yeah.
Jatesh, you have any questions?
So just a small aside, when you say Netscape, I don't know anybody who's of the internet generation probably wouldn't even know what the Netscape is, I
Exactly.
suppose.
I know.
But I have a very personal anecdote with respect to Netscape. So when I joined the computer science program at the Urbana-Champaign, I got a research assistantship in a place called National Center for Supercomputing Applications. So basically, it was one of the largest supercomputing centers in the US, and it catered to a lot of labs around the world which were trying to do massively parallel supercomputing jobs on the cluster, and like we consultants will help them optimize it, answer their questions, and so on.
Mm.
So when I like basically I had joined that, and then when I started working, somebody told me, hey, you're sitting in a very famous seat. I'm like, what do you mean, right? So then it turns out that just very recently, if you remember, Mark Andreessen, the inventor of Netscape, also studied at Urbana-Champaign, and he was doing exactly the same job of a consultant at NCSA while he was a student, as a research assistantship job. And apparently that seat which I happened to get and occupy was the seat that he had occupied. So that was my tangential personal anecdote connecting me to Mark Andreessen in some weird way.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool. Jatesh, any questions from you?
No, I'm good. I think a lot of people have other questions, so we can always open it up for that. But I do
Yeah.
have one kutty question though, because I'm curious about things like this. You know how Nirmala Sitharaman came down to Chennai and she went to the market, so she got a feel of on ground how people are shopping in a marketplace. So essentially, you go to a marketplace, and I understand their problems, I get the vibe of the place. How does that work for an e-marketplace like Flipkart or Amazon? How do you get a feel of your audience or
Oh,
your
very good question. So we actually have an entire science around it. So we have a user research team, UXR team and there is an entire field of study around it, right? So they design studies where they engage with users, and when you engage with users, there are a lot of biases, right? So there is basically interviewer bias and all of that stuff, and interviewees also sometimes give answers that may not reflect truth, right? So you have to design interventions, and there are lots of different types of interventions, right? There are ethnographic studies, there are longitudinal studies, and so on and so forth. So anyway, like cutting that short, so we have a formal UXR team that does frequent engagement on various problem statements that we give to them, and then they go and work on the ground with people, talk to them in various design study formats, and come back with inputs. Other than that, there is a KYC program that the company also internally runs and encourages everybody to do. Like recently, I was in Coimbatore meeting a whole lot of people who are first-time shoppers in e-commerce, who have never shopped in e-commerce, trying to understand what is stopping them from shopping in e-commerce sites. I have gone recently to Tirupur, that's a seller hub, right? So talk to some SME businesses there, talking about their e-commerce journey, how they built their brand, what is the plus and minuses they see in an e-commerce channel versus offline and all that. So we do a lot of that. I mean, I have gone and delivered packets like in this Big Billion Day. Bunch of us actually for an entire day we dressed up as what we call as wish masters, so basically delivery agents. Had bags in our back, and then we went around delivering packages, and then using that opportunity to actually get inputs from people. So that's always an interesting experience, actually. So
Interesting. That's interesting. That's very interesting. So we have a bunch of questions queued up, Jay. So I'm going to go to the audience questions, if you will.
yeah.
So first question comes from Mr. Ramakrishnan. Sir, you can unmute and ask your question, sir.
Uh, yeah, I think a couple of the points you already answered, but the basic thing is how do you try to improve your product? Does you look at Amazon or some competitors, what they offer, or do you have a vision group, or will say that next year we should do this, next 2-3 years we should do like this, something like that?
No, see, I think the way it functions, we start with customers. So we look at what are their pain points, what are their problems. Are we using the best available technology to solve for that? Are we being innovative enough, disruptive enough, right? So we start with customers. We never start with competition because that will be limiting, right? So then, like, you're limiting yourself to what the competition has achieved, right? So you will never look beyond that, right? So we consciously try to not look at competition. Not to say that we don't even scan the competition at all, but our first primary inspiration comes from customers and customer needs. We of course look at around the world how people have innovated for similar problems, right? So there are very new, different business models, technology channels that have come up in various areas, right? So we look at China, we look at Europe, we look at like Brazil and South America and emerging markets. So we get a lot of inspiration from things that have worked, not worked in other markets. All of that helps. And we have both a corporate strategy function and a product strategy function, which is part of my org. And the product strategy function works in tandem with both corp strategy and our product managers and the product leaders across all of my business units to come up with 3-year strategy. So we have a cadence where every year we review the 3-year forward-looking strategy. At the end of every year, end of every calendar year, we do a full strategy workshop where we go through area by area, look at what was done, what has not been done, how market has changed, what are customers asking for, what are the pain points. And then there is a big strategy, like we look at metrics and so on and so forth. And then in that process, we also look at competition, we look at global trends, technology trends, and then come up with a strategy narrative and break it down into like what is it that we are doing for the next 1 year and leading up to a 3-year vision. So that's the process that we run.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Muthu Subramaniam, you had a question. Can you unmute and ask the question and open the video too, if you will?
Yeah. So hi everyone. This is Muthu
Hello.
Subramanian here. Yeah. So I'm into SAP basis, and actually now since ChatGPT and even SAP is trying to be a kind of automation. Actually, 80% of SAP SE is being automation. So I'm pretty afraid that soon, even as a basis consultant, even our work will be taken over by the AI or the Chat GPT. So I'm pretty afraid on that. So can you please uh, explain?
Sure.
Will that be taken over, or only the part of the like how we schedule a job? Only few jobs will be taken over by the AI or the predefined jobs kind of thing.
See, Muthu, unless I know the kind of the very specific nature of work that you do, it's very difficult to answer that specific question. But generally, what I would say is like, if you're doing solution architecture jobs where you're trying to take pieces of software and then figure out how to cater that into a need a customer has, right? So typically it's about figuring out how a customer problem can be solved using a bunch of technology building blocks. That is a little bit more meta level than what a chat GPT can do right now, right? So, but if it is about repetitive patterns of or reuse of common patterns, and you have to replicate it but in a somewhat different way, etc., those kind of responsibilities are more likely to be taken up by automation that is derived from technologies like ChatGPT, right? But the only advice I'll give you, Muthu, is like don't be afraid of new technology, because again, as I said earlier, right, technology is a great leveler, right? So see, you are as new to ChatGPT as anybody else in the world, except maybe a handful of people, right? So it's like almost like you're at the starting line of a race, and you can compete on equal footing, and if you put the interest and energy and passion into it, you can be the lead in that area, right? So instead of being afraid of the technology, why don't you like embrace it? Like go read up about the technology, go look at, like, for example, how Copilot functions in GitHub, for example, right? And maybe you can bring in the change in your org and say that, look, I am going to bring in meta automation by using Copilot and doing lot of things that are today being done using grunt work. And then you can define the next vision for how you're going to use skilled engineers to do more of the solutioning work and design work, and rather than doing rote coding work, right? So I would say that, like, being afraid of new technology is rather than that, I would say look at it as a great opportunity for you.
Super, super. So the next set of questions seem to be very similar, Jay. I'm going to maybe ask someone to. One of the first question is, how does Flipkart compare versus Amazon? I was expecting this question, and there are a couple of questions on the same flavor actually. I don't know who asked this question. Whoever asked the question can probably unmute and ask the question, please. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Somebody asked about e-commerce giants Amazon and Flipkart. Why is Amazon always great interns? Who asked the question? Can you please ask that question? I don't know what you're asking exactly, so maybe you can ask that question about IIT, IIM, etc. All that. Okay, let me read the question, Jay. You have worked with both e-commerce giants Amazon and Flipkart. Why is Amazon always great interns customer service despite Flipkart hiring IIT, IIM top talent? Did you understand the question?
I'm assuming what they're saying is Amazon is great at customer service, and while we are not, while we also hire top-notch talent. That's what they're saying.
I think so.
It looks like it. See, I can't comment on comparison questions like that. All I can say is that for large scale complex operations like e-commerce, there is always something more that can be done from a customer perspective, and we acknowledge that, and we continue to work on it and continue to improve our services. But if you talk about comparisons without talking about any particular company, what I can tell you is that, and this is not our own data, you can look at Red Seer and any of the other neutral reporting data that comes out, and see market share statistics, right? When you look at all party market share statistics across e-commerce, at the end of the day, customers vote with their feet, right? So you can see what that says, and I would say refer to that, and then see whether this statement is in contravention to what you see there. That's all I can say.
Thanks. So next question is again from anonymous. What is fundamentally wrong? Need to look. Whoever asked the question, can you please unmute and ask that question? Okay, let me ask the question, Jay. What do you think is fundamentally wrong / need relook to build a successful company? Asking this because you have built companies and worked in corporate as well.
See, again, it depends on what sort of company you are building and the context, right? So it's very difficult to give a kind of silver bullet answer for anything, any question that is as broad as this. If I know some more specifics, I can at least try and see if I can dig from my experience to offer something that is meaningful or relevant for your context. But in general, what I would say is, like, the fundamental thing that builds any company which is in the knowledge economy is people. right? So that is going to be kind of unchanging truth, whatever type of company you're building, right? Unless you're going and building, let's say, a very traditional kind of construction company, manufacturing company, even then people are the key. But perhaps in a knowledge economy, it is even more the key, right? So I would assume you're asking about a knowledge economy company. So basically, what I would say is like get a bunch of people who really believe in the vision and believe in it beyond just goals around either personal wealth creation or fame or titles or anything, right? So at least the core team that comes together to start something should strongly believe in it and have the tenacity to give it a reasonable amount of time. And the reasonableness is not like it could be 6 months, it could be 1 year, it could be 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, right? I'm not putting a time frame on it, but as a team, you yourself should feel like you have given it everything and you have given it your best shot, right? That's what I would say. And if those elements are there, and of course, there are a lot of other elements that are not in your control, right? So there is market context. Suddenly, there could be a funding winter if you're in a business that needs external fundraising, and so on and so forth, right? So there is a lot of other market context. You can't predict what is happening with things like COVID, GDP of the country, recessions, and global wars, and all that. So I mean, but it's about not worrying about things that you cannot control, but believing in what you want to do and then having the staying power to invest enough along with a group of equally passionate people. That is what I would say is kind of the denominator for success for most type of companies. I know it's kind of like a motherhood and apple pie answer, but unless there is any sort of like real deep context, I can't give much more deeper or contextual answers.
Fair enough. Thanks. So in the meantime, can I ask all the participants to open the video so we can take a picture of all the participants? We'll continue with the Q&A, but if you could please open the video, that will be helpful. Next question is from Ashwin Raja. Ashwin, can you unmute and ask your question, please?
Oh, thank you. Hi, Jeyandran. Great to see your experiences and the timing in each of these companies. To start with, and I wanted to ask if, let's say we're in Amazon, did the world surprise you over the next 20 years? Did the technology evolution, how things went, were you surprised how the next 20 years went for you? That's a question. First question, and follow up is, of course, what do you think is the Amazon of today, and what do you think would be the high level changes of technology that might drive the coming decades? We talk about AI and all that stuff, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Two questions there.
Yeah, see, I think the surprise part of it, see, we all knew that, like, I mean, if you look at from the 90s, I mean, my kids today cannot even believe that we lived in a time when let's say smartphones were not available. They were like, how do you even drive around, know how to get to place A to place B, right? They can't imagine a world where there is no Google Maps, right? So they almost feel like when we tell them that, hey, when growing up, we did not even have like phones. Like in my house, we never had even a landline phone, right? So they're aghast. They're like, they imagine that like we lived in like some sort of either abject poverty or something like that, right? Like or in some stone age, right? So that's how much technology has actually really transformed the world, right? Like right from even the invention and spread of the internet and phones and to more recent technologies now, be it blockchain, cryptocurrencies, AR, VR, IoT tech, and now of course AI, right? And so on. And these are the technologies that at this point we can see, and if you look at the next 5-10 years, I do see the most amount of disruption in a good sense is going to come from these technologies. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Shiva Nadarajan, you have a question? You are, unmute yourself, please.
So,
yes,
Jay, I think it was a phenomenal session. I really wanted to ask you one question that, the e-commerce in India and e-commerce elsewhere, let's say in Europe or something, seems to be very different, that we are pushing on accelerated delivery. Today I got my delivery from Septo in 9 minutes, which I can afford to take it in the evening, but still, you guys push it and, deliver it in 9 minutes. And I'm sure that to do that accelerated, you are going to burn more money, and you are never going to make profits in this. Where is it going to be in future? So today already, things like your Dunzo is now networking the nearby Kirana shops, and Kirana shop is directly calling me and asking, do you want anything? So they don't want to go through the platform. In future, is there a future for the e-commerce, at least in India? My son lives in Germany. When I tell him that he has to go and get some medicines, he says it will take, I'll get it tomorrow. Whereas you can get here in probably 10 minutes. So why are we accelerating so much in India?
Okay, so two-part answer. You asked, is there a future for e-commerce in India? So, and the other question that you had is the sustainability of these business models where you're doing accelerated delivery and all that, right? So I'll pick the second one first. We don't do 9-minute deliveries. So we don't have hyper-local model where we are trying to do 30 minutes or lower deliveries. We tried it when the customer need is there. But customer need has to be married with what is viable from a sustainability and economics perspective, right? So unit economics perspective, we tried various things to try to make the model work, but it was very clear to us that at least in the near term, unless there is some big technological disruption, maybe we will automate the last mile delivery by using like lots of dark stores and sending drones out for last mile or something, right? Like we are still far away from that, right? So unless that happens, we didn't see the possibility of doing this sustainably, because Indian customers do want value, right? So there may be a small set of customers who are willing to pay additionally for getting the 10-minute delivery. But most customers, if you ask me, want a discount and faster deliveries. And that's not something today's technology can deliver to customers. So a lot of companies are trying, and I'm not faulting them, because whenever there is a customer need, they will give it their best shot and try to see if they can occupy the niche. And that's always a way when established behemoths are there and new companies are coming and trying to disrupt and occupy a niche that is not today served by that behemoth companies, right? So it is fine. It's great for everybody, great for customers. I'm also a customer, right? So when I need like 10-minute deliveries, I will also use services that are willing to burn 200 rupees per delivery to give me that in 10 minutes. I may be ordering 100 rupees product. I know that today, like most of them operate in very, very deeply negative contribution margins for that sort of business. So that's why we decided we are not going to do it. So we shut down our pilot of quick commerce. We were not even that quick. Like even then we did not feel like 10-minute deliveries were ever going to make sense. So we had half an hour to 45-minute deliveries. Even that did not make sense for us from economics perspective, and we shut it down. Around the world, if you see, a lot of quick commerce companies have been having a bad time. They've been scaling back. Even in India, some large companies that tried quick commerce delivery models have stopped. Very recently, you would have seen another competitor of ours, which has a lot of physical stores, which tried a express model using a partner that you named yourself recently, right? So they stopped their express service because I would presume it was clear to them that there is no sustainability for that, right? So that's the question on that part. To a question of like, is there a future for e-commerce in India? And you talked about Kiranas calling you and they want to disintermediate the platform. See, the value of e-commerce is what, right? So it's basically selection, pricing, and convenience. Of course, your Kiranas can give you convenience, right? So they can give you what you want very quickly. You can call on the phone and they will give it to you in half an hour, 1 hour, whatever, right? So convenience is one element that Kiranas can beat hands down e-commerce companies on, no doubt about it. But if you look at selection and convenience, you cannot in a 2,000 square foot Kirana have 16,000 SKUs stocked enough, right? And they cannot have a back room that can stock for the kind of velocity and the kind of working capital they will need to have long tail stock, right? So that's just not possible, right? So the selection game completely is against this sort of like unorganized general trade kind of market, right? So if you look at our, like any big platform like ours, we have several tens of millions of unique listings on our platform, especially in areas like fashion. It is what is called as a long tail category, right? So you do need that vastness of selection to be able to cater to every customer need, right? So that is selection. Pricing. So why is pricing something that e-commerce as a channel gives as a benefit for customers, right? Because of efficiencies of scale, right? Because we operate at such massive scales and there is a lot of disintermediation that we are able to do, right? So the entire middle mile channels and basically your your whole model of your wholesalers and retailers and so on and so forth, right? The entire distribution channel is in some sense disintermediated, and brands can come directly on our platform and sell, and thereby offering lower prices to customers and nationwide, right? So they don't need to build their own brand presence and so on and so forth, right? They don't need to invest in it. So like we attract hundreds of millions of customers every year to shop on our platform, right? So our ever shop base is like 400 million plus, right? So something in that ballpark, right? So that selection advantage and pricing advantage are a huge advantage for e-commerce platforms, and that is going to stay, especially in a very, very diverse country like India, right? So diversity comes with that long tail aspect as well, right? So in a largely homogeneous and small country, right, say like South Korea, right, like maybe the cultural trends and the nuances, the selection choices are not going to be so vastly different. But if you go and look at even fashion apparel in like the south of the country versus the north versus west versus east, and every corner thereof, the the kind of the plethora of the diversity that you see is tremendous, right? So the selection advantage is stronger in a country like India because of the huge diversity that is conferred, that advantage is conferred on e-commerce platform is therefore stronger, and geographic diversity, right? So if you look at areas which are hard to reach, remote areas, etc., tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, right, it's very difficult for anybody to sustainably put a large, let's say if you want to put an electronic store, mega store, like imagine, do you have enough customers in a tier 4 city or a tier 3 city to be able to afford the kind of like real estate cost and personnel cost and inventory cost and running the business? Will you have enough scale to do that? No, right? So that is where, because you are able to do that at scale, run supply chain at scale, and our sellers are able to get brands to actually give them much better pricing because they have efficient channel through which they're able to distribute. So these are the things, right? So I am very confident that like today in India, the overall penetration of commerce that by e-commerce is only like less sub 4%, right? 840 billion dollar commerce market in India. Largely it's grocery. 700 billion now, 650 700 billion of it is grocery. The rest of it is like fashion and furniture, mobile electronics, appliances, and so on and so forth, right? So there is a bit of a Pareto there. So that 840 billion market today, only 4% is penetrated by all of e-commerce put together in India. But if you look at markets, Germany you talked about, or let's say UK, South Korea, US, China, these numbers have reached anywhere from 35% to 45%, and they're growing year over year, right? So you can see the kind of headroom that we have, right? So there is a 10x headroom, even if the pie doesn't grow in India. And we all know that the pie is growing in India, right? So I mean, it's inevitable that our economy is going to continue to grow, and we will reach number 3, if not number 2, in nominal GDP in, let's say, in the next 10 years to come, right? It's inevitable. Every economist around the world agrees to it, right? So the pie itself will grow, and even without that, like think about that doubling effect, right? Pie is going to grow, and we are going to go from 4% to, let's say, 45%, right?
Yeah.
So that is the potential for e-commerce in India.
Super. Thank you so much. A few other questions there in the line, but we are almost out of time. But I'm going to go through some of the questions quickly, Jay. The next question is about, I'm going to ask the question. In startups, most CTOs don't make great product people. That's generally right. Most senior product leaders have in common. What is your take on that? That's kind of a straightforward question to you.
I don't want to generalize. As I said, that each individual is different. I've been formally managing product for almost 10 years now, where I've been leading product teams. So I'm not like a CTO who is masquerading as a CPO. I have done formal management of product teams as well for close to a decade. Before that, also for almost like 10 plus years, I've been managing product. Like a lot of the platform teams I managed, there was no dedicated product person, right? So the engineering people also play product roles in many of the platform roles. And in very early days of even this consumer internet companies evolving, etc., even a formal role of a product manager did not exist. For example, when I was leading a lot of teams at Amazon, there was no separate product manager, right? I was doing architecture, I was doing engineering, I was also doing product specifications for the products that me and my team built, right? So some of these concepts are new. Product management as a formal function came by only like maybe late 2000, 2007, 8 onwards, kind of it started becoming a discipline in and of itself. And yeah, I don't know, it may be different depending on the trajectory the person has taken. If they have been only in core engineering platformish roles and have never done any consumer facing products, then maybe what you're saying may be more true. But if you typically work on consumer facing products, it's inevitable that you will over a period of time start weighing in on product decisions, understanding how user research is done, how product hypothesis is formed, how do you judge product market fit, business model fit, and all that, right? So even if you're doing engineering role, if you're senior enough, you will care about it, know about it, and in inevitably also influence it. And a lot of my leaders today in my next level as well are managing both product and tech. Some of them come from a pure product background, some of them come from a tech background, some of them have done both for a few years in the past. So it's very different. So I wouldn't take this generalization too seriously.
Okay, thank you. So Parsadi Raghavan, you had a question. Can you unmute and ask the question?
Yeah, thanks Jay for all those valuable insights. So one question that I had is, you have been part of many innovation initiatives back in Amazon as well and in Flipkart as well in terms of the IP and whatnot. So given your role, it is also putting up day-to-day fires and day-to-day issues that come up and come up with solutions and also drive innovation. So being in a role, how do you balance both, or if you want to balance innovation with putting up day-to-day fires, how do you go about that?
See, for day-to-day fires, it's not like, I mean, if I need to jump into, let's say, a security incident that happens or some production outage that happens, I will do that. But you typically, success in an executive role like this comes from you having the right structures, processes, and people to be able to run most of these things in a repeatable, deterministic way, and also take learnings from any incident to be able to avoid a repeat of the incident, right? So your job should be not about being a hero jumping into a call and trying to suggest solutions, but an executive's job is to actually create the right structures, processes, frameworks, and people to be able to solve the problem in a more holistic way, right? So that you are not needed. So one thing I always say is that, like, senior executives role is basically to try and make themselves be redundant. That's what they need to do, right? So at least in these aspects, that I strongly believe that is the case, right? On day-to-day operational stuff. So but you of course have to continue to keep your pulse on execution and operational hygiene metrics and other things, right? So you cannot completely let go of it or delegate it. So you need to do that, but it kind of has to start fading to the background so that you can start thinking more about your stakeholders, customers, engaging with them more, engaging with them better, thinking about the next three years to 5 years to 10 years of innovation roadmap, technology disruptions, and so on and so forth, and investing and building in talent, skilling for your org, and those kind of things are what you want to really spend a lot of your time on, and on things like innovation, right? So, and innovation comes in several formats, right? So one is continuous innovation, where you're trying to do incremental innovation on your core base, where you're trying to improve it and create something better. And so we grade it in three different ways, right? So one is the moonshot innovations, which are very disruptive but probably have a very low probability of success. And then you have continuous innovations and things in between, right? So for lack of a better terms, just call it as in between, right? So these are step jump innovations, not continuous, but they're not like very low probability of success kind of things, right? They may need more work, more investment, and much more thinking and more trials for it to succeed, but we know that it'll work, right? If you give it enough shots, enough energy and enough retries. But in moonshots, you have absolutely zero idea whether it'll work or not, right? So we classify it into these three. So we generally use a framework internally where we try to do like a 70-20-10 kind of a split across these three types of innovations. And of course, this is taking aside bandwidth for like keeping the lights on and your business as usual stuff, right? Where you're not innovating per se, but just extending and doing regular feature delivery. Beyond that, whatever budget you have in terms of time, bandwidth of your team, and cost, capital allocation, you try and do it in a conscious way into this sort of a framework where you do a 70-20-10. And for the 10 part of it, the moonshot innovation, which is what people talk about when they typically think about innovation, you have different constructs, right? Like we have a labs that we have set up, so where we have a very structured process where we do a complete scan of all the different new tech breakthrough tech, disruptive tech that is on the horizon. Then we intersect it with how our industry is evolving, where there could be overlap between the two, and then we pick a few things and then do some selective bets on that. Right. So we are doing some work on metaverse right now. We are doing some blockchain and work in that space, and so on. Right. So those are in that bucket for us.
Thanks.
Right.
So Jay, we're out of time. A couple of questions from students that I asked offline is that they're looking if Flipkart would be willing to offer internships or some kind of program for students to work with latest technologies. Any particular way you can help that?
Yeah. No, we do actually regularly do internship hires from all the colleges we go to for campus hiring. And even this year, we have a whole lot of interns that are joining. So this must already be happening. So just
How
look out with your placement office and check with them on when Flipkart may be coming to your campus for internship hiring, and you can apply, and
yeah.
that's
So,
option. We only do internships for pre-final years though.
acha,
Like
okay.
basically in the summer of their third year.
Yeah.
A lot of companies do offer second year internships and even first year internships. We don't do that because we believe that a certain level of formal learning is required. Like we are not a company with very deeply structured onboarding processes. Like there is a lot of figure it out kind of thing in Flipkart, right? So we don't want to bring in, let's say, first year interns and then kind of leave them on their own and they feel frustrated. So
Understood.
we do expect third years, and a lot of them actually get full-time placement offers as well with us.
So I think I would follow up with you on that later on offline, because there are quite a lot of students from CEG for whatever reason are not able to get that opportunity via the placement center. I don't know why,
Okay.
but there are a lot of students who are looking for things, and Flipkart would be an aspirational company because of the brand recognition, etc. So I'd
Sure.
like to discuss that with you to see how we can accelerate or facilitate that.
Sure.
We're almost out of time. So one last question. Raghu, you want to ask your question as the last question of the day?
Yeah, I'll make it short and sweet. Jay, it was a great conversation knowing you. I'm from 94 ECE. My question is a real, purpose of human life, right? Does it get enhanced or distracted by technology or by the materialistic growth? I know it's a one-to-one or individual choice or a decision, but I just want to know your personal comment. Yeah.
So I believe that it's a very I can talk on this for half an hour or 1 hour, but I mean I do think about this question a lot, right? So my in a short crisp answer is that I do believe that in the long term, basically people following their passion and not worrying about earning a living or their basic needs, etc., is when I think we will maximize human potential as a civilization, as a species, right? If you have aspirations of ever reaching out to the galaxy, having an intergalactic civilization, all that, we need a lot more people pursuing their passion and doing it out of sheer passion for their work, or be it science, technology, engineering, math, even art, culture, philosophy, whatever it is, right? Today, our society is still the fraction of time that is spent on pursuing passion versus earning a living is very small. I think technology over a period of time will create that level of plentifulness where human civilization can pivot its attention to, of course, I mean, those people who are willing to use that free time they have to pursue deep questions of meaning around life, existence, consciousness, and all of that will have the freedom to do so. And those of us who feel like that is not my thing, and I would rather use all the plentiful free time I have to go play a game in VR and immerse myself in virtual worlds with AI avatars and be the god of the world or king of the world, can do that. But I think having that choice, in my opinion, in the long term is the right directional trend for human civilization to go if we ever aspire to kind of get out of this planet as the single place where we live, and that's at least my personal belief.
Thank you, Jay. So we're going to wrap the session. So before I wrap the session, a couple of things. If people would like to approach you, Jay, for further questions or connect with you for further discussions, we have provided the LinkedIn profile of yours in the invitation, so people can
Yeah.
connect through that. Is there any other contact detail that you would wish to share that you can give to people?
Yeah, no, LinkedIn profile is great. I mean, I'll anyway get an email when people hit me up on LinkedIn, and I may be a bit slow to respond to LinkedIn. I do not check it so very frequently, but at least like once every couple of weeks or so, I do look at my messages and
Okay.
connect requests and all that. Please do
Okay.
connect through that. My email ID is jeyandran@gmail.com. So basically my first name at gmail.com. You can connect through that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Super. Mavisha, you had a question or a comment before we wrap up? Mavisha Ramachandran. Okay, no answer. Jitesh, do you have anything to wrap up before you say anything before we wrap up?
Yeah, quick question. When can we start seeing drone deliveries happening in Chennai?
Not very soon. It's a promising technology, but will take a while to mature. We are experimenting with drones for our middle mile drop-offs from our fulfillment centers to middle mile hubs and all that. That is where the technology has the most potential in the near term. But yeah, I mean, in the long term, who knows, right? You could very well see that happen.
Thank you
I
so
was
much.
hoping you'd give me. I was hoping you'd give me a timeline that I could hold you to.
Tough
One
question.
one of the lessons you learn very early on in executive roles is never commit to any particular timelines in
Yes.
public.
I had to say this, Jay. One of the executive coaching classes I had in the US when I was running a company there was that the guy came and said how to say no 10 different ways without saying no. And they actually give you a media training class, how to handle media questions, and say how do you answer a question which looks like you answered the question but came out saying yes. Anyway, thank you so much for the session, Jay. It's very exciting, very interesting. A lot of good questions. I know
My
we
pleasure.
didn't have
My
we didn't
pleasure.
have enough time to go through, but I'm sure people will reach out to you through LinkedIn. All my guests have told me this thing. Their experiences, they get a lot of requests after the session is over. Some of them said that their LinkedIn contact list doubled after the session is over. So I hope you can deal with that as well. It will be a good problem to have, I think.
Yeah. So, Vish, one thing I do want to call out. So, first of all, thanks a lot for the invite and giving me this platform to at least share whatever experiences I can, if it can help people in any way.
Yeah.
Happy to have this forum to network with our CG alumni and exchange thoughts and ideas. So,
Yeah.
thrilled to do so, and it was a pleasure. On the LinkedIn invite, though, like apparently, like there is a number at which LinkedIn caps out connections. I haven't got to the point where I can prune my connections. It's like some
Ah,
30,000, 35,000 or something. So
ah.
unfortunately, I'm not able to accept connect requests. People can do a follow though, and follow. They can send me a connect request as well. But unless I clean up a few thousand, I can't accept new LinkedIn requests. So if you send me a connect and then I'm not able to accept it, please know that it's because of this reason
I
and
didn't.
nothing else.
Interesting. I didn't know there is a limit on LinkedIn. Oh, maybe it is.
Yeah.
Okay, I did not know
30
that actually.
30,000 is the limit beyond which they ask you to prune your connect list, your
One of
network graph.
one of my first guests in CG level connect was a guy from LinkedIn. Actually, he's a product manager in
Ah,
LinkedIn. Maybe I should send a note to him saying
yeah,
that,
please
dude,
do.
you have to fix your product. CG guy from I think 2007 or 2008, but he's a director of engineering at LinkedIn.
Okay,
So I should probably talk to
interesting.
him. Anyway, thank you so much for the time and interesting session today, and hope to get more exchanges from people with you. And again, thank you all of you for joining on a Sunday evening. The next session will be in March, towards the third week of March. We already identified who the guest is going to be, so I'll make the announcement shortly on that. Somebody else had a question in the question sessions, and can we have more of the sessions? And I think he asked the question to you, Jay, that can he have more sessions with you?
Oh,
So what I what I had to say is that yes, we can bring in our guests again, and we also do other guests every month. So whoever asked the question, I would request you to join the CG sessions every month because we are bringing in a variety of guests, men, women, US, India based, corporate, entrepreneurship, academic, sports, arts, etc. All that. The only common denominator for all my guests, they had to be a CEGN. That's the only common denominator. Apart from that, it could be any other criteria. But we have done 20 sessions so far with 20 guests once a month. I'm trying to see if I should increase the frequency to more than once a month because I have about 300 people in my list to schedule.
wow.
And at this rate, I'll do 30 years of this. So, at some point, I might do a little bit more frequently because there are truly, believe me, there are so many superstars in CEG at various levels in various companies in all parts of the world. It'd be nice to hear the story. And like the story you said about your patent and your IP, we didn't ever heard that. So I want to hear stories like that from all our alumni who've done great things. So other alumni can be inspired, motivated, be aware of those things, etc. So again, thank you for your time and good luck with Flipkart. I am a
Thank
Flipkart
you.
customer.
Thank you.
I,
Thanks, Vish.
I do shop in Amazon as well, but I do comparison shop. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thank you for your time. I will see you around. It was great.